Clete, you heard Eunice reference some of the skeptics who say the deal's transactional, is full of promises, tariffs remain in place. You think it's more substantive than that?
Absolutely. And I think people are going to be excited when they see the text of this agreement, because it is a lot more detailed and it covers a lot more topics than most people are talking about right now. And let me just give you a couple examples. You start with forced technology transfer, which really was what started this whole dispute in the first place. And 3 of the 4 issues that were articulated in USTR's 301 report are covered in this agreement. China commits to stop doing it, and it's enforceable. Then you look at intellectual property. It's a very long chapter, lots of stuff in there. 2 highlights for me are trade secrets, which is something that our companies have had concerns about for a long time, something the president actually talked about at the UN General Assembly when he talked about Micron and the theft of their trade secrets. Well, now China's going to put in place a modern regime to protect that that includes criminal penalties. There's also a lot of stuff in there on pharmaceuticals and on patents, which is really important for that industry, especially after they lost some ground in the endgame on USMCA. Then you look at financial services. You've heard a lot of talk about the removal of the equity caps, but what's even more significant to me are the provisions in there on licensing, so that once those equity caps go away, China's going to have to grant licenses to U.S. companies that apply on a non-discriminatory basis. And finally, on agriculture, we can talk about the sales, the purchases over the next 2 years, and that's good, but this is a fully fledged agriculture chapter like you'd see in a trade agreement. And it really gets into a lot of details in terms of China having to adhere to science-based standards, having to conduct biotechnology approvals and things like that. They're going to help U.S. soybeans. They're going to help U.S. corn, beef, pork, and I could go on. So I think this is a really good deal, not only for the U.S., but also for China. And I agree. I think it's going to help both of our economies moving forward. Still work to do, but this is a really good first step.
Jeff Moon, Larry Kudlow really worked to frame this phase 1 as a big deal. Seems like Clete agrees, but at the same time, the details on forced technology transfer, it sounds like, and the enforcement there are yet to come, perhaps to come in phase 2. We just heard our Eunice Yoon saying that phase 2 seems to be on a lot shakier ground as far as how that actually pans out from the Chinese perspective. Jeff, is this a big deal?
Well, I think we need to be careful not to confuse the forest for the trees here. The forest is China's industrial policy and how it fundamentally discriminates against foreigners. President Trump launched a 2-year trade war involving tariffs on billions of dollars of Chinese imports with the promise that he would resolve that, and he has failed. So we need to recognize that. China has always proposed since the beginning of the trade war to write a few checks, make some big purchases, and call it a day. And basically, they have succeeded. The issues that we're discussing that are other than the purchases, frankly, were all on the table at the end of the Obama administration and were discussed in the context of the bilateral investment treaty that was 90% completed. So the issues that we're talking about in that respect represent incremental progress. They are not revolutionary progress. And then we really need to read this agreement closely on what China does. With regard to forced technology transfer, for example, China passed an investment law that came into effect 2 weeks ago. And China claims that the ban on forced technology transfer resolves American concerns. If you look at the text and you look at the implementing regulations, you will see a ban, but you'll see no details on proceedings to punish violators or whether there are any penalties or not. So that's basically not enforceable. And as for licenses, I think the American credit card industry can teach us how licenses work in China. In 2012, the World Trade Organization found that China unfairly blocked its market for credit cards. And the credit card industry in the United States has faced various licenses and approvals and all sorts of delays, and they are still not able to fully go into business. So I'm very skeptical. My enthusiasm is well contained. Love to see progress here, but what is not in the agreement is much more important than what apparently is in the agreement.